If you can't communicate well, you shouldn't be in business. If your people can't communicate well with you, they will drive you crazy. It's as important as culture. Anybody who's worked for me, if they say anything, what is John's hot button? It's communication. There's nothing else that's that important.
Well, welcome to the podcast. We have Jon Summer on today. Welcome, Jon.
Hey, Brad, thanks for having me. Hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, very excited to have you on. So, Jon is the founder of Garaza Design, which we'll get into, but he is one of the most connected people in the Valley here in Arizona and very well respected. So, I appreciate making time today.
For sure. You as well.
Well, Jon, maybe we start here. I know leading up to this, I've always found a lot of value in the podcast, especially for young entrepreneurs. People that are young business owners and trying to navigate the business life. Right, as an entrepreneur, business person, you're trying to deal with customer service. We'll get into Garaza, what you're doing now, and how we're making that a standard, and what we do at AFT, and how influential you've been, and the customer service you offer to my customer base and client base. Where does that start? I mean, I think you have a really unique approach to customer service, to building relationships with people really fast. I know that I've noticed that from the first time we met. What do you feel led to this point in your career where you could build a relationship with somebody extremely quickly and they feel like, hey, John's my best friend. He has my back all the way.
Well, I guess that started early in life. And um, really, I think an entrepreneur is not 100% of the time, but there's books about this. I would say 90% of entrepreneurship is actually inherited. And don't be nervous if that's not in your blood already, because you can teach it. But I think for the most part, you're kind of born with this fire, and either you're born with it or something in your childhood kind of creates the fire. So for me, I grew up with two parents very, very different. My mom was a starving artist that was very creative, but really was kind of an introvert, at least early in my childhood. And my dad was a very, very successful businessman, and so I kind of saw both. And as I was growing up, I'm like, okay, that looks like a lot of fun. And it the relationship part of it, I really don't know where that came, but I was always a super social guy. I always had a lot of friends. Always had. I was just very competitive in everything I did, and I realized really young that building relationships is what drives your business. If you don't have a client, there's nothing else really matters. And I will tell you that from a very young age, my daughters were always super embarrassed because I would make friends at the grocery store. I would make friends at the dry cleaners. Everywhere I went, it doesn't. I was the guy in the airplane that you dreaded. Any rate, I was always talking to people because I enjoyed people. Really, that's where it came from. And then obviously that became beneficial to business.
Well, it's one thing to maybe understand, hey, I can communicate with people. I can make friends easy, embarrass my kids, at the grocery store, as you mentioned. How does that correlate to running a business? And maybe we get into cyber and kind of what you created there. But as you take that into your professional career, and now you're dealing with customer service and clients that you're in a realm. Maybe speak to cyber and what you built there, because let's be honest, Super Bowl's happening, and if tech goes down, internet goes down, you know, that's one of those calls that someone's pretty upset, calling you John, and it's a fire alarm. So,
So
how does that cater in?
so the start of cyber was never planned, as most careers are never planned. I was in college, and I went to college for different reasons than most. I did not go to learn. I went to party, and I went to get um, my youth out of my system, really more than anything. So as I overextended my fun, I kind of got into a lot of debt in college, and my dad had a security company. So my dad had basically a just security system company, which is really what our industry was 30, 40 years ago. And so I worked for him in college trying to get out of debt. And I finally went to my dad one day and I said, making money is way more fun than spending money on school. I wasn't into school. It wasn't my thing. I didn't learn well. I never could retain what I read. So it was really challenging for me. And then I started really going gangbusters with my dad's company and selling. And then one day he sold his company, and I was super, super upset with him, and realized later that, it was the best thing for him and our family. So really, at a competition, I kind of had this anger towards my dad, and I said, I'm going to build my company bigger and better than you ever did. And I just remember that conversation. It was a competitive moment that it just created a fire. And between that and my mom kind of really struggling, I was like, I'm going to do this. And so I started cyber in 1995. I was 23 years old, and most people don't have the capability at 23 years old. I was gangbusters. So I started in a little town. If you're not from Arizona, we started in Fountain Hills, and I don't know if you know this whole story, Brad, but so I was in Fountain Hills, and my goal was, all right, let's start in this little town for two reasons. One, because everybody in this little town likes to support each other. And that'll be a quick, easy way to say, hey, I have a local company. And, I knew that the word of mouth would go faster than going, into the big sea of, Phoenix or Scottsdale. And so I started there. And I also had this little thing like, okay, I'm going to screw something up. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I'm going to go there. And if I screw it up, then we're in a small little town. Then we can leave and go to the big town. So, any rate, I started in Fountain Hills and really kind of owned the whole city in a quick amount of time. I mean, I started this company, which today is, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but it's a several $1 million company. It's the biggest company in the United States. It's Cyber Group, which is a bunch of different entities underneath Cyber Group. And back in the day, it was called CyberSound. And today, I think it's the biggest, if not one of the biggest in the country, if not in the world. And when I started this company, my dad gifted me a truck that was probably worth $500. And he said, this is your start to going to start a business. And I was fairly into material things. I was out of college, and I had, the fancy car, and I had the fancy shirts and everything like that. I sold everything, and I got $5,000. And I took that $5,000 and I put it into my checking account, and I started my business with 5 grand. So you hear people all the time, well, I need 100 grand to start a business. I need 200 grand. I need $1 million. Well, I started a company with literally $5,000. And day one, I knew that I had to do a lot of sales and get a lot of deposits to be able to really get this thing going. And so that's kind of what I did. I just ran around. My dad taught me how to work with builders. And so we started as, interesting enough, we started as a audio video company, simply because when my dad sold his company, which was called Dictograph, it was a national company. He had non-competes in place, and I really wasn't in the middle of that, but it was a little muddy. So I'm like, all right, instead of starting a security company and getting and having some challenges with the guys who bought his company, I decided to start a sound company. I knew nothing about sound. I just knew that it was the same license. I knew it was the same clients. And so I ran around selling in wall and in ceiling speakers in 1995 when they were just brand new. And quickly, I found a product out of New Orleans that was a home automation startup. And I'm not going to claim that I was the first guy in home automation, but I was definitely one of the first guys in the country in home automation. And I went to my dad, and we were tinkering with some of this in my dad's company, but my dad's like, I don't want anything to do with that. And I was young, I was fearless, I had no risk. There was no risk for me because I didn't have anything. So I'm like, the heck with it. I'm going after this. I think it's a new industry. And so we started dabbling in home automation, and the bleeding edge is not even the right word. I mean, this was way, way early in the home automation days. And we found out really quick that, um, if you didn't deliver, you were gone. I mean, you had to make things work, and if you didn't make them work, you had to answer the phone, and if you had to be available. And this is brick phone days, so things were a little bit different, but or even pager days. But we had to always be on call, and now everybody is. But I was a believer that if you over communicate, you over service, then it doesn't matter. The rest doesn't matter. And so that was really the early days. So that was the start of cyber in 1995 in a tiny little one room. Really, I started in an apartment, and I just ran around trying to sell people on a promise that I couldn't even show. I didn't have a showroom. I had nothing. And so really that's the hardest part. Once you get the showroom and all that, it's a whole different game. But that was how we started it.
Well, it's interesting, John. I mean, you bring up a tremendous amount of points, and one thing I want to focus on is when you're starting and you're going into audio video and then automation. Um, was there a separation of time that you're doing audio video before the automation started? And along that line, you made a comment that you started with builders. What was your secret? Were you knocking doors? I mean, how did word of mouth is important, but you have to start somewhere. How did you start to get that lifeline of projects and customer base to start building?
This is a funny story. So the first so I was working in Tucson for my dad while I was in college, and I started into sales. And my dad said, "Hey, listen, Phoenix is a really big market, and we're doing just a little bit of business there, and there's just a huge opportunity there." And so I was working with builders in Tucson, and so I go, "All right, let's move to Phoenix. I'm done with school. It's not. I didn't finish school. Truthfully, I just it wasn't for me." And I said, well, I want to go to the big city. I want to go kill it. I want to go make a bunch of money and build a big business. And so, yes, I want to go to Phoenix. So I go to Phoenix, and everybody knows the company Toll Brothers. And
Hmm.
I believe Jeff Edmonds was early in the days of starting Toll Brothers. If not, Toll Brothers bought Jeff Edmonds. And so the first door I knock on at 23 years old in Phoenix after I moved here was Mr. Jeff Edmonds, because he was the big guy. And I always started with, let's go to the top. I'm not scared. I don't need to, he's the biggest guy in town. Let's go knock on his door. And I wouldn't always advise that today, but I was young and fearless. And so I knock on his door, and he opens the door and he goes, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Hey, I know you're the biggest builder in town, and I want to, do your work. And we're doing, these new speakers that are built in, and we're dabbling in home automation. We're the only ones, and we're doing something nobody's ever done." And he goes, "What's your name?" And I said, "Jon Summer." And it's not the exact words that he said, but he basically said, "Get the heck out of here. Get off my property." And it was a little bit more colorful than that. And I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 what's wrong?" And he goes, "Is your dad Larry Summer?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Get out of here." So I go back to my apartment. I call my dad. I'm like, "What's going on with this guy?" And he goes, we had something or other. And I said, "Okay, before I go knock on any more doors, Dad, is there anybody else that doesn't like me or you or our last name?" He goes, "No, that's the only one." I said, "Okay." Later on, I ended up working with him and doing all of his work, and we became very good friends. And it was just a funny story. But I was competitive. I just went and knocked on doors every day. And I had a young kid that I kind of brought on early. And we had this. And so imagine two 23-year-olds fresh out of college, starting a business. I don't know anything. Literally, I know nothing. I just know that I don't want to worry about money. And I was competitive. So we start knocking on doors. And I told my sales guy, I said, "Here's the deal. Every day we get one appointment. You get one and I get one. And if we do that for 6 months, I feel like we're going to be really busy." And he goes, "Well, what do we do after we get the appointment?" I said, "Honestly, let's go back to my room and let's party and play video games." And he goes, "Well, you're the coolest boss ever." And so that was literally what we did for the first 6 months of cyber, was do that. And then but if we didn't get an appointment, we didn't get to go have fun. And literally, if it took us an hour to get the first appointment, knocking on doors, literally walking up to builders' job sites, we did that. But if it took us 12 hours, we also did that. And we were pretty much every single day we got an appointment. And it was this little competitive game that I created. And I later used it for my entire sales team as we grew into a pretty large and national company. And as stupid as it sounds, it was just, we had goals, and our goal was an appointment a day. And that's how I started.
It's fascinating, especially the competitive nature and the willingness that whether it's 1 or 12 hours, you're not going to give up. But going back to Jeff and Toll Brothers, you mentioned, how that went through your first transaction. How did you rebuild that? How did that come around where you ended up doing all Toll Brothers work?
Well, many, many years later, we became the biggest company in town. And I'm going to say the most rewarding thing in my entire career, outside of seeing my employees and my team be successful, because that was really what I set out to do after I met my goals. But after that, the most rewarding thing was, you're chasing and chasing and chasing clients. And then some of these guys you chase many years later, they call you and they say, "Hey, you've built a really good reputation, a really good company, and you're the best service company, and you're the best technologically advanced company, and just an innovator in the field. And we'd love to do business with you." And I'm like, "Dude, I've been chasing you for 20 years, and now you're calling me out of the blue." And there was no better aha moment in my career when those guys would call. And that's what happened with Toll Brothers. It was very interesting.
And to get to that point, there's a journey there, and you've kind of touched on this, John. But when you're and you have your young friend with you, and you're the best boss because you're playing video games after you set that appointment. Well, the appointment set. I mean, walk through what that process looked like early on. I mean, are you selling them on the audio video? How does install taking place? When did you start hiring back end and kind of get that operation going to support you?
So we went pretty quick. It was one employee, then it was two employees, then it was five employees, and it was 10 employees, and then it was 50 employees, and it was 100. I mean, it just went really quick. But um, it was interesting because we were the first in this industry, and I guess I'll liken it to Tesla, but on a very much smaller scale. If you have something that's different, and it doesn't have to be actually the product. It can be the service. It can be the way that you deliver the service. It can be the uh, the innovation of just anything that you're doing. Much like your business, everything you do, you are the leader of. You are on the leading edge and the bleeding edge, and you know what comes with that. But we were we were never satisfied with what we did. We always were reaching for what's the new product, what's the new way to deliver this product, and most importantly, how do we make our partners successful? And so I spent this is probably something for those out there that really are looking for an edge. I spent just as much time trying to make my potential clients or clients healthy and successful and make their business grow as I did mine. So it didn't matter if it was an architect, a realtor, a designer, a builder, or a homeowner. I instantly took a liking to what do you do and how do you do it? And is there anything that my creative brain can help to make you successful? So I focused really more on them, and then the business kind of falls in your lap. And a perfect example of this is 2007-8. I think was when the big recession hit, and we got to a point we just were building a big showroom, and we were looking at all of our clients, and nobody had any work. I'm like, okay, we got a problem here. If these guys don't have work, we don't have work, and we got to figure out something to do. So we basically, at that point, I had kind of knocked on every door in town. I had made relationships with every builder, architect, designer in town. And really, like I said, the way I did it was we have a new shiny toy. Whatever the new shiny toy was, we had it. We found it. We figured it out. We marketed it. But at that point, we said, okay, what are we going to do? And what I spent the probably the year to 2 years doing was connecting my relationships and connecting my clients. So if I had a builder, I would ask him, hey, who do you want to know? What designer do you want to know? What architect do you want to know? What realtor do you want to know? And they would give me, oh, I don't know this person, this person. Well, I know them. And so then I would also go to that person and say, who do you want to know? And they would go, well, I don't know this architect or this guy. And so I would put these little groups together, usually 3 to 5 people, and then I would cater it at my showroom. And I would usually spend 10 minutes going, hey, just want to give you guys a little bit of technology today. And it wasn't about me, but it was more of how can you use technology? Because we had some savvy people at that point, and I was not the most technical in my company at all. But I would try to figure out what technology could help their business boost, as well as what relationships could I do to connect them. And so I spent 2 years of my life connecting people and trying to get them referrals so that they had business, so that I had something to do. And it was probably my most proud moment of our 20 year my 20 years at Cyber was during those 2 years of recession. I just felt really um, proud of what I built.
I have to give you some credit for a couple of reasons. I mean, John, when I started this conversation, I was speaking about the value of relationships, right? And we kind of went through because there's a lot of value in cyber and what you've done there to create this incredible company from a young age. But a point you made, you talked about that. The nugget for anyone listening is you weren't just focused on your business. You're focused on your customer, your client base's business, or their lifestyle, or what can you do to better that. But I think you kind of tailed off here, which I think is a really important point. You said, what are the relationship intros you can make? And I think Malcolm Gladwell, if I'm not mistaken, has a book like Connectors. There are people in this world that are connectors. You're definitely a connector. And I've seen you operate when you're like, for you, you're not just looking at maybe who's established. You're like, who's up and coming? Who should I know? Right. And you're kind of tapping into your network of designers and architects and builders. And so, you've done a great job to know not just who's established, but who's up and coming. And then you can kind of position through that. But on the flip side, as you're mentioning, you're making those introductions yourself. And by doing that, you're being that connector, which in turn, whether those two end up partnering at some point and become successful, that may not affect you individually and your pocketbook per se or your business, but that relationship and that gesture and that kindness goes a long way. That reciprocity at some point, I'm sure, pays itself forward.
Yeah, I was constantly looking for solutions for the people that were important to my business. And when you call somebody and you're not saying, "Hey, Mr. Builder, Architect, Designer, Realtor, I want you to buy something from me." I never did that. I went, "Hey, I see what you're doing. It's pretty awesome. Have you ever thought about adding this to your tool bag?" And perfect example, this is the funniest one ever. Silverleaf Realty. Okay, I've been a part of Silverleaf. It was probably the biggest part of my success was finding the biggest and fanciest country club and joining. And it was really weird how that happened. It wasn't. It wasn't the normal way that you join a country club. I actually had a builder call me and needed me to um, take over a membership. Asked me if I want to take over a membership. And I'm sorry, a lot, and it came with a membership. And it was just a weird way that I got in there. But Silverleaf Realty, who's probably, well, I think they're top five realtor in the country, real estate firm, and they don't just do Silverleaf, but they do outside of Silverleaf. I would I went to their group and I basically said, this was when the market was dead. Nobody was buying, everything was on sale, and nobody was buying technology. I was the last thing in their mind that they wanted. I said, hey, I want to teach you guys some technology tricks that might help you guys be more successful during this downturn. And they're like, what does it have to do with you? And I said, I have some pretty technologically advanced people, and we've come up with some really cool things. So I get in there and I bring out my iPhone and I said, all right, first of all, who knows how to use realtor.com on the app, and who knows how to um, do any of this stuff on the iPhone? And everybody looks at me and goes, we have no idea what you're talking about. And so I started getting on realtor.com well way early in the app world and showing them how to use this app for their benefit, and not one of them knew how to use it. And then I really said, okay, this is it. I'm going to figure out what my edge is, but take it to their business. And so I went through and learned everything about what realtors do and how they do it. And for the most part, at least 15 years ago, realtors were low tech. And so I figured if I can add some technology to what they're doing, I can raise their game and therefore become friendly, and then the business will fall in my lap. And it did. So that was just one of the little things. Builders, for example, they didn't know how to use a tape measure on their phone. And there's just so many tricks of the trade that everybody knows now. But in 2007, 8, nobody knew. So we just spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we could help our potential clients.
Well, and to take that back a step further, I mean, of course, building those relationships, the referrals will come. Hey, John's your guy. When someone was in Silverleaf, which is a very, I think most people know that community here in Scottsdale. But what's interesting about the '90s, I look back. I was an electrician growing up in San Diego at that time. When you started your company, and for a long time, the electricians did the integration, and it wasn't even home automation. You're talking just TV, right, or possibly satellite at that time, and so they're running coax, and they're probably running the phone lines through the house, and that was the extent of it. How hard of a process was it for you to show the value, to either the builder or the client or the electrician to now break off and really, start building home automation and everything that led to it?
Well, it wasn't. It was very, very hard, and we had no um, we had no resources. We had no tech support. We were it. Like I said, there was this company that nobody even knows, and probably my successor from cyber, Ben Lenz, who's a superhuman being who bought my company the second time I sold it twice. Um, he probably doesn't even know this story. There's a company called Regency Alarms. They were owned by a company called Silent Night, and they were a security system, and they had a little intercom connection that was built into the security system. Which back in the day, it was security intercoms vac. We'd sell a security system for $1,000, an intercom system for $1,000, and a vacuum system for $1,000. Didn't matter who it was. That was kind of the game for custom builders. For $3,000, you'd get the whole package. Obviously, you know how much it costs now, but these little security systems started integrating intercoms. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Now we have two things that are together, and that's one less box. And then later, they basically, between their tech guy and my tech guy, we figured out how to turn on a light. And then there was another company in New Orleans called Home Automation Incorporated. And they got into that, and it was awful. It was so broken. It was so clunky. It was so not reliable. And at this point, my dad's like, "Stay out of that. It's going to kill you." And I said, "Dad, I have nothing to lose. I think this is going to be the future." And so I actually was. This is a true story. At one point, when we went national, we had 880 employees. I was the lowest tech person in the company, with the largest tech company doing what we did in home technology. My drive behind this was, I love cool, fun stuff, but it's frustrating because I'm severely impatient and severely ADD. And so I was like, how do I make people like me, or people that just don't have any technical capabilities, how do we make technology easy? And that was the drive between
Mm,
that's where home automation came from in my brain, was let's figure out how to make it easy. So it was all about making it simple and not complicated. Now, I learned very, um, very much later that you can't just do everything in home automation. And I think it doesn't matter if you're doing home automation, if you're doing electrical, HVAC, or if you're a general contractor. At some point, you need to come up with a recipe, and you need to sell this process and this recipe to your client. And the client always wants, in our industry, they would say, well, I want this TV, I want this air conditioning unit, I want this, lighting control system, da 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 da. And so we'd play with it and we try to make it all work. Well, they didn't all play well together, especially back in those days. There was Train was the outlier. Train was the absolute nightmare for home automation systems. But I had a builder, who I won't say his name, is a dear friend of mine for 30 years, who said, we're using Train, figure it out. And it just didn't work, and it made us look terrible and stupid and all this stuff. So finally, between me and some of my super technical guys on my staff, I said, let's create the ultimate recipe. What works the best together? Is it this TV, this air conditioning system, this shade company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm going to change the way we're doing this. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to go to our clients and say, this is our recipe, take it or leave it. And they're going to go, you're going to lose a lot of business. I said, no, we won't. Watch. And so this is the most valuable thing that I ever did from a um, reliability standpoint at Cyber. Was I said to my clients, you want two things. Every single client wants two things. You want ease of use, and you want reliability. And I can't deliver that unless you use my recipe. But if you use my recipe, I can look you in the eye and say it's going to be easy to use, and it's going to be reliable. And on top of that, my entire team is going to know these products that I am recommending to you inside and out. And we don't know the other products inside and out because we can't know everything. So that was the point where we went from just any old technology company to the most reliable, the most dependable, and the best reputation in town, and if not nationally, was because of that.
well, how did you get to that recipe? I know a lot of people today will know Crestron, Control 4, Savant, right? There's options there from the brain of that integration. What were you doing at that time to balance, all the different options for a client, but still have your own recipe, and create that?
Um, we used all three of those products over the years, and we we pushed these systems. I had one really, really technical guy in my company, and he was the mad scientist. And we would take it to his house, and we would just play with stuff, and we would try to break it. And you know, really, where we took off was when we went with Savant. We were the early adapters of Savant, and there's a whole backstory to that. But I'll tell you the good side of it. The good side of it was, we were in a recession still. This is still dating to 2007 and 8, and Apple was on fire. And everybody in the industry was scared to go to Savant for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was that they were going to lose touchscreens and lose the profit that came with touchscreens, because now you have this device that everybody has, and How are you going to make money when you're now using a device that everybody has? And I said, I'm looking at it different. I'm looking at it as Apple is the most reliable product on the planet from a everything standpoint. And this is when Apple was nowhere near they are today. I said, why wouldn't we leverage that? Why wouldn't we leverage their success, their reliability, their cool factor, their, the really the shiny new toy? And so we really, we went all in on Savant. I was speaking at Apple events with some pretty well known names that everybody knows. And I was a kid. I mean, I was under 30 years old speaking at Apple events, and it was bizarre. And I do it today. I'd walk up in 5 seconds, my heart would race, and I'd probably sweat and run out of there. I was fearless. I had no, just I was so excited about what we were doing. I was so passionate about what we could do that others couldn't do, and our forward thinking. And we just, one of the things, I'm sure this will come up later in one of your questions, but culture is everything, and that's
Mhm.
something that everybody knows, and we don't even need to talk about it because everybody knows. But Brad, one thing that I noticed about your company, and it's almost an emotional thing. The culture in your company is exactly what I had. You have figured that out like nobody. I mean, there's few people in town, but the the passion of everybody in your company, the respect everybody has for everybody, the respect that you have for your subcontractors, your partners, and every source. It's everywhere. It's in face-to-face conversations. It's in your social media. It's your reputation. And that's exactly what I did. And so that's why you and I were drawn to each other so quickly when I started my new business. And it is like looking at me 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't know how old you are exactly, but I'm going to be nice and say 15. But it's like looking at me 15 years ago, and
It's probably more
it's,
like 8 or 10,
all
but
right, we're going to call it eight. I have more gray hair, that's for sure, and I'm wearing glasses, and you're not. But you give it another 5 years, you'll be their brother. But at any rate, no, culture is so important. But people, like, I wouldn't hire the most technical guy. I wouldn't hire the guy who had the most experience. I would hire the guy that sat in my office and made me feel good. And that is my next, I guess we'll call aha moment. Hire people that make you feel good, because if they make you feel good, they're going to make your clients feel good. And I would poach, hate to use that word, but I would poach people in my daily life that I would find at whatever it was, the grocery store, the bank, the whatever. And I would just, some people just knew how to build a relationship. Some people knew how to have strong customer service. Some people just made you feel good. And you know who those people are. We all have friends that make us feel good, and we have friends that are tough. It doesn't mean they're worse people, but there's certain people that make you have this, they just make you calm. And you just can look at him and go, all right, he's got integrity. He's got, I just want to be friends with this guy. I just love this guy. And so I would hire people like that, and I would teach them the industry, because I'm like, you can't teach that. You just can't. And
Mhm.
so that's where good culture comes from. It doesn't come from, hiring any Yahoo with, a lot of baggage. It's got a lot of experience and maybe he's the best guy in town. And yes, later in life we grew and we had to hire some people that had experience over um, you know, the culture side. But the people that had it, as I called it, they're the ones that moved up the company the fastest. And so at the end of the day, if you can't put these people that work for you in front of, a $20 million homeowner, then it's not the right person, and you got to keep looking.
It's very sound advice, John, because where I have a lot of admiration for you and what you built is that it's one thing when you're 10 employees, it's one thing when you're 30, right? When you're 800, it's very difficult. And anyone that knows cyber, the company you built, Cyber Group, and Cyber Sound, I mean, to your point, you're dealing with clients that are, I mean, you're dealing with builders, you're dealing with suppliers and vendors, and then you're dealing with a client that is building a $20 million home. So you have to have people that can communicate with so many different parties. And there's a fine balance in the trades and in construction where you have to be able to lay down the law when need be. You have to be assertive. You can't be pushed over. But at the same time, to your point, you have to be a good person. Like you have to communicate. And it's really tough to find that balance of people.
You mentioned communicate. Anybody who's worked for me in the 30 years I've had now 5 businesses, if they say anything, "What is John's hot button?" It's communication,
Hmm.
communication, communication, communication. There's nothing else that's that important. And the first day I interview somebody, I explain, "These are my expectations, and it's in my handbook. It's in everything that I do that you have to communicate." That doesn't mean that you have to answer a call at 3 in the morning. That doesn't mean that you have to text me back in 3 minutes. That just means that you have to communicate. And it's if you can't communicate well, you shouldn't be in business. If your people can't communicate well with you, they will drive you crazy. And it's as important as culture. It is so freaking important. I can't even tell you. And that's, it's unfortunate because Brad, you and I have so many commonalities that it's just almost weird. But it's not a healthy world to be on all the time. And so I'm all about sending my team members on vacation and almost making them go on vacation and really trying to get them to shut down when they need, because today's world's different than it was 20 years ago. But there are ways to communicate, but there are also times that you do need to turn off, and that's critical. And Brad, as you all know who are listening, is not very good at turning off, and I'm not, and I'm right there with him. And it breeds success, but it also is not. It's not the healthiest thing. So you have to have balance. And you have to figure out, you know, how to shut down, and whether that means family time or hobbies or literally going on vacation. But it's something that you need to be on when you're on, but you also need to figure out how to turn it off. So I'm still striving to learn that.
Yeah, that's tough, especially when you're passionate. You mentioned passion a few times, and going back to the culture side, when you speak about communication and just, I mean, you mentioned making sure that some of your employees would take PTO. So small things. I always try to think about it like you do, where if I was an employee in this position, how would I feel? And one example, we just had July 4th not too long ago, right? And one of our employees was out of town visiting some family and had planned to fly back July 4th. And I found out that night and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, come back on the 5th. And like, well, I got to get back to work. And I'm like, well, if you come back on the 4th, you're fired. And they're like, what? Because it's like, you want to take the pressure off. Come back on the 5th. Work's going to be here. Like, spend that time with your family. Don't be leaving fireworks. And it's just those little things sometimes to be, our team just wants to be acknowledged. And rewinding earlier back, John, for you, not only were you at the forefront of automation when no one was doing this in the 90s, but you're at the forefront to say, why be in college? Like, why not be in the trades? And I think one of my biggest pet peeves as I gotten older, we kind of have this tone as a society that, kids will be graduating high school and it's like, okay, John, you just finished high school. Like, where are you going to college? And we're putting this pressure on kids instead of saying, you can go to the trades and build success. I mean, we need it. You and I need it. We're seeing it right now that there's a lot of value. And look at you, who very open that you didn't finish college and you built one of the most successful companies in the US in your industry. Like, it's just incredible what you've done.
So I talk about this all the time. Before I started Garaza, which we'll get into in a minute,
Yeah.
I had two business ideas. Actually, that's not true. The week I sold cyber, the week I sold cyber, I got out of cyber because I was overdoing it and I started having health problems. And so you got to be careful in how on you are, I guess. And so I did take a lot of years off. But the week that I sold cyber and I officially was leaving cyber, and I went home to my home office, and my wife comes into my office and she's like, "What are you working on?" And I'm like, just some stuff." And she kind of goes behind my back and she goes, "Well, what do you mean stuff?" She's like, "You sold your company, you're out, you've done your time, and it almost killed you. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just playing with something." So she grabs my mouse and she looks at the tabs on my computer and she goes, "You wrote 8 business plans, you've been retired for a week." And I said, "What am I supposed to do?" I said, I can't golf all day long. I can't. I've been going 100 miles an hour for 20 something years. I don't know what else to do. So it's just in me. But where I was going with this is um, when I started Garage, I had two ideas. One idea was I knew this was a home run going into this garage business, which, like I said, we'll talk about a little bit later. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to teach young high schoolers and college kids how to be an entrepreneur. They go to school and they learn all these different subjects, and then they go to college, and yes, they take entrepreneurial programs, they do all this stuff. But if you go to a college graduate today who has gone to one of the best business schools in the country and you ask them, do you know what QuickBooks is? They're going to say, what's that? Do you know how to get insurance? No. Do you know how to go get a contractor's license? No. Do you know how to budget a checkbook? Do you know how to, all the things that we need as contractors are not taught in school. And if they are, then I'm mistaken. But I can tell you my experience is they're not. So, there should be a class called Life, but that's a whole nother conversation. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to start a program much like the SAT and ACT programs when you learn how to do testing and whatnot. I wanted to start this program for young wannabe entrepreneurs, and I was going to basically bring like 6 or 8 young kids into my. I have this cool man cave, and I was going to bring them into my man cave and basically do, like a 12-week course and spend, like 2 evenings, 2 hours a night or something like that on teaching them what it really takes to be an entrepreneur, and why does everybody think that it's not cool or respected to be a contractor? Because I can tell you with my daughters, I have 2 daughters, 22 and 24, their whole generation thinks we go to college and we go get a job. And they're all fighting for these jobs for $50,000, $60,000. And I'm like, well, I can tell you right now, I'm hiring people that didn't go to college and they're making a lot more than that. And once they're there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, these guys are making 6 figures and they didn't go to college. So why is there this stigma that you have to go this route in today's society? It's wrong, and it's not for everybody. It is for some people, but I can tell you right now, there's guys laying floors that are making 200 grand. There are
Hmm.
contractors that are framing. One of my biggest clients in my new business who spent more than just about anybody. He was a framer, one of the biggest framers in Arizona, and he made millions of dollars and has more houses than most of the doctors or lawyers or, you know, professionals that I've done. So it is a problem. It is something that I would like to put my time and effort into. Unfortunately, right when I wanted to start that business, COVID hit, and I just didn't think it was the best thing to have, 8, 10, 18-year-olds running around in my man cave with the time. So I kind of put that on hold, and then this next opportunity kind of took over. But you're so right on that, and it's something that I'm passionate about. Is we need to put some energy into getting some of this youth into the contractor world, and I have a lot of ideas about that.
Well, speak to Garaza. I think it's really important to understand, that with the experience you had building cyber, how does that go into what you're doing now? Because your plan now, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, it's not that it's boutique. It's a very sophisticated company. I mean, you've been hugely integrated in what we're doing with our clients. They love it. For anyone that's followed me on social media, they see that I've shared a lot of your content, and it's really amazing. And so it's more of a passion project, if I'm not mistaken, but it's still a huge benefit to the clientele we serve.
Well, first of all, thank you for being our biggest cheerleader. That's the most rewarding thing that we can do, is have one of the biggest, if not one of the biggest, definitely the most respected contractor in town, um, sharing my passion, our company's passion for what we do. So I'll rewind a little bit. I sold cyber mainly because I was just exhausted, and I'd gone for being a contractor is tough, and you do it for a long time, and it wears on you. And so it was in my best interest to take a break. So I didn't know what a break meant. I was financially secure at that point. I didn't have to work again. I uh, I kind of figured I probably actually wouldn't ever work again formally. I figured I would do some consulting, which I did, and I figured I would just dabble in some things, and I would never really start another company because it was a big journey. It's a life commitment when you start a company like that. So, at any rate, I had this idea of building. Well, my wife kind of pushed it. I needed to get out of the house. I was driving my wife crazy. You hear the same old story all the time. So I was driving her crazy and had nothing to do. I did start playing guitar, and that was my new hobby. I needed something to do, and I kind of got obsessed with that, which I do on everything that I do. I go all in on everything. It's just my makeup. And so we'll just say I had about 75 guitars running around my house, and my wife's like, "What in the heck are you doing? Get these out of my house." So when I sold the cyber building, after I'd sold cyber the second time, I had a 1031 situation, so I had to buy another building. So I'm like, I'll buy this building and I'll put a little man cave in it and make it cool. So I was a midlife crisis musician, and my dad was a huge car collector, and I started my um, passion for that young, and so I had a handful of cars. So I built this man cave with some cars in the back. And as I'm doing the garage in the back, I'm like, I call a few of my builder friends. I'm like, all right, who's doing high end garages in town? And they're like, it doesn't exist. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
No, no, no. There's all these. We're in the car mecca. We're in the hottest is construction market in the country. There's got to be somebody. So I'm looking around. There's like nobody. But I'd seen this product at Barrett Jackson many, many years ago, and it was a hall. It was a very high end steel cabinetry product that I just loved. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna put that in there when I build this building. And so I kind of tabled that and never really ended up doing it. And so I kind of reached out to them and said, hey, who are your dealers in town? And long and short of it is because of Barrett Jackson, they didn't really want to play in the sandbox here. And I said, well, you guys are selling at car shows and you have that whole market kind of cornered, but I know all the builders, architects, and designers. You really should get into that space. And so I kind of went home that day and, just was thinking to myself, I think I'm ready. I think I need a new challenge in life. So I called a few of my contractor friends and said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. What are your thoughts? And they're like, please. And they're like,
Yeah.
we're begging you. There's such a market. So I saw this as the same opportunity as home theaters, home automation. I'm like, this is ripe for now. And I'm very design centric. I've, and you guys did this to me, all you builders out there and architects, designers, because I worked with you guys and you made all these homes amazing. And so I'm used to this high end level of finishes. And I go through these houses, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million. And the entire house between the architect, designer, and the builder are designed to the nines. Everything is thought of. Everything, every wall is a piece of design art. And then you walk in this garage, and there's four white walls, and there's more money in the garage than any other room in the house. And I'm like, okay, this is a huge opportunity. Do I really want to do this? Because I really think it's something that's going to go nuts. And so that was kind of the concept behind Garaza. And Garaza is I search high and low for names when I brand a company. And this is another thing that I think would be a value to those young entrepreneurs. A name is very, very, very important. And I actually believe in branding something that nobody knows. When I started cyber, it was me and a buddy. We were not sober, and we're running through a dictionary, and I saw this word cyber. This is way before anything was ever called cyber. We were the first cyber named company, I think, in the country. And so cybersecurity, all the different things that have come out, it was just, truthfully, it was just luck. But I looked in the dictionary. That's how long ago this was, and it said futuristic, and I said, bingo. And so when I started Garaza, I'm like, all right. I started thinking of all these different names, but I looked in the dictionary once again. Actually, I went on the internet, today's dictionary, and I found this word Garaza, and it was the way that you pronounce a garage in Croatia. And I had just gone to Croatia with my family. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And so I look up and it says Garaza, Garazia, Grazia. There's three different ways to pronounce it. I'm like, everybody's going to screw this up. It's going to be awesome. And I literally chose it for that reason, and it really looked cool with the letters together. And I had some branding that I played with, and I like taking something that has never been heard and branding it, and that becomes our identity, and that's where the name came from. So, anyway, that's kind of the story behind Garaza Design, but it was more because I felt that this was the forgotten room, and as I started just reaching out, I found out that yes, there's garage companies. They're all over the place. They put in the wood cabinets, they put in the slat wall, they put in the floors, and it's been done for 100 years. We are not all about that. We are innovators in everything we do. We do 3D renderings. We do products that you would normally see inside of a $20 million house, whether it's wall paneling or whether it's our cabinetry or whether it's our lighting. Everything we do, we are, I'm not saying that we're only an elitist company, but we are in the bleeding edge of every facet of the garage. And we really, so we built a really killer showroom with a local designer here that Brad happens to use on almost what half your projects, Kristen Hazen Design.
Kristen Hason's phenomenal. Yeah.
So Kristen and I had started working together with another gal named Jessica Morale. They both worked for a company called SDS many
Hmm.
years ago. This is another moment that I think was back in my cyber days. I think it's a value. Why did I choose SDS to do my showroom at Cyber? They were the biggest designer that I didn't work with. I called them. I worked with 20 designers at risk of offending the designers I worked with, but they were the biggest company in town. I said, well, if I hire them to do my showroom, they're going to have to give me some business. And so I played that game, and I also did it much later with something else. But at any rate, that's where I met them and Kristen Hayes Design. So she did our showroom and she did my man cave and has done a couple of my houses and whatnot. She's phenomenal. But anyway, that's kind of how the whole thing started. And yeah, it's been a wild ride, but we are definitely trying to take things that normally are not in a garage and put them in a garage. And I'm constantly unhappy with what we're doing because I know that we can get better. And it's just that's the fun of it. It's a passion project for sure, as you mentioned.
But at the same time, I mean, there's some points there. I mean, you spoke earlier about the importance of the name, like from cyber to Garaza, so there's value in the branding, which you've are very in tune with your brand and how that, um, will draw on the attention of those you're advertising to. You brought up that, just like you said with cyber, you were always looking a way to bring value. It wasn't just about your business, it's others. And so you had preemptively contacted other builders, had a good understanding of, hey, this is something that is a demand need, especially in this high end luxury market where clients do have nice cars. They want to show them off. They want to make it more of a museum as opposed to, just pulling in my garage and going to my house and it's leaking oil in the garage, right? It's going to be a nice, additional room into the entire home. And so you see the value there, you're bringing the value add, and then luxury service is kind of in tune with that because there's a demand for luxury, and there's not a lot of luxury products sometimes in these spaces. And then finally, you talked about I didn't work with SDS, but they're the biggest in town, and so again, the funny thing about that is I many of us are looking for ways to expand our business. Is for me as a builder, is there a big architect I haven't worked with? Is there a designer? Right. And what's the key? Find a great job and bring them in. Hire this designer, and then you bring them in, and that relationship will be very fruitful. In as long as you knock it out of the park, which you did with SS, of course, and it shows to you being ahead of your times, if you will, John.
Yeah, when I was young, I had a top 100 list on my wall. I was that guy. I was the Glengarry, Glen Ross, mentality. I had a top 100 on my wall of the top 100 players in town. And I just went down the list and I was, as I told people in my company and friends, we'll be the biggest company in the country. It's not when it's not why or how, it's going to be when. And I just had this list and I said, I'm not stopping until I get every one of them. And it was, like I said, it was more fruitful when towards the later years when those few that I hadn't gone after because life got busy, they had ended up calling me and I ended up getting every single one on that list. And so today, you have been the most successful builder in town, if not in the nation, with social media, and everybody knows that, and that's a feat that, um, yes, social media runs the world today, but not the way that you've done it. It's something that builders really traditionally haven't been successful in completely marketing their company through social media and showing the inside and behind the curtain. And you've done that in a way that everybody's envious of. And yes, we know what those of us that actually dabble in social media, we know the commitment, and the commitment is it's life. It literally is
Mhm.
life. And so that was your method. My method was, and I talk about, there's hunters, there's fishers, and there's account managers. And account managers are super important because they manage a client. Fishermen are a dime a dozen, but only some of them are successful. Fishing is very hard, and if you're really really good at it, just like in life, you're going to catch a lot of fish. If you're just a normal person and you throw your bobber in the water, you're going to have a hard time. But there's some people that are built to be hunters, and I don't know why I am, but I am. I was born that way. I was competitive, mainly because, as crazy it is, I just wanted to prove my dad that I could do it bigger and better than him, because I felt like I was, you know, I felt like the opportunity was taken away from me when I pulled out of college to go run his company, and then he sold it, and I'm just like, Dad, I'm gonna show you. And it was my mom. She was like I said, struggling at the time, and I wanted to help her and provide for her. And so it just, there's the competitive side, there's the culture side, and those are there's and you got to care. So these three C's. I guess it sounds kind of cheesy, but there's a lot of things out there that did this. It's not just a couple.
Well, again, like I always say, I mean, it's easy to look at your success, John, and be like, oh, he had an opportunity that no one else had, but they don't understand those nights of you being out there knocking doors in the heat of Arizona, right? Going to Jeff's house at Toll Brothers and going for the biggest, fish in the pond. And there's something to be said about, the work ethic behind the scenes, that no one's a success, overnight. There's a lot of years behind the scenes, that go into that. So what do you do for fun?
So I play music, and I'm a midlife crisis guitar player, and so I uh, I play with some buddies. Actually, playing tonight. So a couple nights a week, I've built a studio that you've been to, which has
Yep.
been kind of fun.
Incredible.
It was when I sold cyber, I had this amazing showroom. Showrooms are important. It's another thing. I think it's really important to have to make your clients feel comfortable in the environment where you're trying to sell them on what you're doing, and the passion comes through in the environment. So super important. But I play guitar. I travel a lot. My kids are now out of the house, so I was a softball coach for many many years with them, and I'm always after new hobbies, because hobbies are healthy to keep you away from business addiction, which you and I are the poster childs for.
Yeah, we are. And for anyone listening, I mean, at some point you have to, and I know you'll leave your contact here, John, but you have to go tour his studio, his lounge, his studio, see the guitars, see the showroom of all the garages and all the setup there. I mean, it's really phenomenal. To your point, that showroom will sell itself. The first time I went in, I'm like, yeah, this is a win. And my clients have gone in, same thing. Like it's an easy sell when you go in and see what you built.
Yeah, it was a weird thing because it was a man cave that I'd built 7 or 8 years ago, and then we morphed it into a garage showroom. And some people walk in. We actually had a client walk in last week, and he's like, "What is this all about? I'm not here for this." And he got a little frustrated, and I said, "Just chill." And so we we tried to, like I said, you have to create an environment where your clients don't want to leave, and sometimes we actually need to get them out. But it is important that you're not in a sterile conference room with the typical fluorescent lights and all that. It's just not a welcoming environment. So I definitely believe in that. It doesn't matter what budget you have. Figure out a way to make it something where your clients would like to stay. But Garaza Design, just for all those that are listening, um, our flagship product is a steel cabinet line that can be done in any color. It can be done in pretty much any size, and it's fairly reasonable. We do get involved in flooring and wall paneling, lighting design, garage renderings, lifts, anything that's garage related. We do it. If we don't do it ourselves, we have really good partners that do it. But like I said, we are very forward thinking, and there are things that we do that nobody else is doing or has done, and that's what we pride ourselves on, is changing the industry. I didn't get in this industry to do anything other than literally completely reinvent the garage space, and that's what we're doing.
So where can they find you, John?
So you can find us. Our studio is in the Scottsdale Air Park on Hayden and Raintree. You can find us at garazadesign.com. You can find us at garazaaz.com. At Garaza AZ is our Instagram page, and you can stalk any of Brad's stuff, and we're all over that too. Thank you, we appreciate you a lot. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun, and we do 2-car garages. We do very small systems, we do medium systems, we do large systems, and we do crazy exotic stuff. And custom homes is about half of our business. Uh, Probably garage suites, which are all the buzz in Arizona, not so much
Mm,
everywhere else. Toy Barn, Motor Vault. There's a racetrack called Apex. These are a big part of our business. They're basically man caves for garages that are in a big industrial area that maybe has 50 to 75 of these, and then they have a common area for everybody to hang out. And it's a cool, fun thing where on Saturdays and Sundays, everybody's working on their cars and getting out of their houses. And then we do some commercial, whether it's hangars or restoration shops or whatnot. So we do a little bit of everything. And we do kitchens. It's morphed into a lot, but we're having a lot of fun.
yeah, that's amazing. Well, John, you've been absolutely incredible. I can't thank you enough for coming on, and appreciate the friendship as well.
Hey, Brad, thank you so much for bringing me on, and like I said, the friendship, and like I said, it's you and I have so much in common. It's almost like looking in a mirror that it's scary sometimes, but I'm super proud of your success as well. And I there's you're an innovator, and I look up to you as well. So I'm glad we got to do this today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.